If you're new to our channel, we'd love to have you join our little community. Just hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications. We promise it will be worth your while.
I went to bed after my shower, ignoring the warm drink Paul or Fran had made. I slept. The lack of sleep the previous night ensured that, but it was not restful, and I awoke with the feeling that I had had bad dreams whose content I couldn't remember. I lay in bed trying to get my brain in gear. I could phone in sick and lie here all day, but then Paul would probably be in and out, wanting to know if I was okay, and I didn't need that. I had just decided to heaven myself out of bed when there was a knock on my bedroom door. "Lizzie-Beth? It's me, Paul." Dear, who else would it be? Oh yes, it could have been Fran. "Can I come in?" It was definitely Paul who came in, wearing the old boxers and t-shirt he slept in. He sat on the end of my bed and looked at me. "Lizzie-Beth, I made a decision last night. I am ashamed about what I did yesterday. I have decided to put Fran out of my life forever. She is too much trouble. I've packed up all her stuff along with the old case of Mums, and I'm going to take it to the rubbish tip later on." I looked at my brother and saw sadness in his eyes. "Paul, is that really what you want?" "What I really want is for the last couple of days to have never happened. I like being Fran, but I'm frightened by her. She is so different from me. I don't feel I can control her." I nodded. "I've had the last 8, maybe 10 years to learn what you have thrust upon yourself in a day." I chewed my lip, thinking of a smile. "When I learnt to drive, you brought me my Mini rather than let me drive Dad's old Rover. It was something I could handle. Control can only come with experience. You may have years of experience playing with clothes and makeup, but you never got to be Fran in the presence of others. Not even Dad? You never had, maybe never even wanted, to experience the emotional side of being a girl." He shook his head. "Fran is like a butterfly coming out of Paul's chrysalis. She has to learn to stretch her wings before she can fly, but they are the most beautiful wings. Think of it this way, Paul. I think I can forgive you for what you did. I believe I can forgive Fran, although at the moment I think she's a bitch. However, I'm not sure I could forgive myself for making you live without her again." "I'll give it some thought, sis. Have you considered what to do about Jez?" I frowned. "You have the excuse of the emotional roller coaster of becoming Fran, extenuating circumstances. What excuse can he possibly offer? Will he jump into bed with every good-looking woman he meets? Do you still love him?" I put a finger to my eye to wipe away the tear that was forming and then nodded. "Good. Hold that thought, sis. When you ran out of the bedroom yesterday, he was beside himself, angry with me, angry with himself. He knows he was wrong, and like me, I think he will have learnt his lesson." "Maybe you're right. I'm still thinking about it, though, Paul." With that, I got up and hustled Paul out of my room so I could dress in private. I'm sure the countryside tried to look beautiful as I drove past it, but frankly, I wasn't aware of it today. In the office, I got my head down to work. Avoided biting the heads of too many of the girls when they asked about the party on Saturday. I was returning from getting coffee for a man who made whirligigs for a living when my phone rang. "Hello, Condor Radio, Elizabeth speaking. How may I help you?" That's what the phone procedure said I should say, rather than what I wanted to. "Lizzie-Beth, it's Fran." I raised my eyebrows. "I had a call from Jez's head. He didn't go into school this morning. They were wondering if you knew where he might be." "Oh, Fran, you don't think—" I paused, thinking that Jez might have done something really stupid. "I'll meet you at Jez's house. We'll start there." I threw the receiver at the phone's base unit, grabbed my bag, and ran for the door, leaving inquiring faces in my wake. Jumping into my car, I drove like never before, urging the little Mini up the hills, foot flat on the floor all the way. My guardian angel must have been on overtime or having kittens, as I eventually pulled up at the end of 2 long black skid marks outside the semi-detached house where Jez lived. Fran's car was already there, and I saw Fran on her knees, looking through the letterbox of the front door. "There's no sign of him, but no smell of gas," Fran said as I ran up. I opened the door with my key and we ran in. Fran made for the stairs while I started searching the ground floor. On the dining room table, propped against a vase of dead flowers, was an envelope addressed to me. I sat in the chair in front of it, put my hands flat on the table, and stared at the envelope. I couldn't bring myself to touch it, fearing what message it might contain. Fran came into the room. "There's no sign of him upstairs." She must have seen what I was looking at as she paused, then said, "Lizzie-Bet, would you like me to open that and read it?" I sniffed, then nodded at her. She took the envelope, and as she slit the top open, something shiny fell to the floor. I recognized it as the diamond tie clip that I had given him to celebrate our engagement. I gave a big sob and everything went dizzy. I was being roughly manhandled, and then I felt the shock of cold water in my face. "Lizzie-Beth, wake up! Wake up!" I looked at Fran from the floor. My bottom felt bruised. I must have fallen off the chair. My blouse was wet through, and I looked up at Fran and saw the vase from the table decoration in her hand. "It's all right, Lizzie-Bet. It isn't that sort of note, but it is a Dear Jane letter. You had better read it, sis." "Dear Lizzie-Bet, I have let you down so badly, I will never forgive myself. I have been unfaithful to you, and to make it worse, it was with your sister too. The trouble is not that I don't love you. I do, very much. But I've also fallen equally in love with your sister. I now find myself in a situation that whatever decision I make, I will leave somebody upset. But I have made a decision, and it's to stop seeing both of you. So it is with great regret that I cancel our engagement. I am going away for a time to sort myself out. I will probably move away so you won't have to avoid me. With my tainted love, Jeremy." No! At that point, I knew the meaning of love. His sin was forgiven in my heart, and I wanted him back. "I guess you don't want to lose him, sis. Do you know where he might go?" Through the choking sobs, I gasped. "To his mother's. She lives in Shropshire. Market Drayton." "Come on, we'll take my car. It'll be more comfortable than your Mini." Fran went out to start the classic Rover P6 that had now been owned by 3 generations of Bundens. Following the road that skirted the south of the Cotswolds, we joined the M5 to head north. The old luxury car had been built at a time when global warming would have been considered a good thing, if anyone had heard the phrase. So we needed to stop frequently for fuel. I was sullen, wondering if Jez would be there. I didn't really want to talk, but it helped pass the time. Initially, as if by agreement, we talked about anything other than the situation with Jez. But as we got further north, I asked the question I had been suppressing since we left. What will we do if he is there? I'm going to tell him the truth about me. That should cool his ardor and help him make the right decision, Fran said, biting her lip. Leaving the motorway, I directed Fran along the route I had last traveled with Jez in happier times when we visited his mother to announce the news of our engagement. We eventually passed through the old town with its half-timbered buildings and on to Little Drayton where Jez's mum lived. As we turned into her road, my heart leapt as I saw Jez's unloved Golf parked at the curb. I had my door open before Fran had pulled to a halt and ran to the front door, where I pushed the bell with one hand whilst hammering on it with the other. Jez's mother eventually came to the door and opened it with the security chain on, preventing my attempt to push in and get to my lover. Elizabeth, calm down, girl. Look, Jeremy has told me what has been going on, and I don't want any trouble. You can come in if you promise there will be no violence. Not that I would blame you. I just want him back, Mrs. McIntosh. There will be no trouble, honestly. She pushed the door closed, removed the chain, then opened it once more and showed me through to her conservatory. There, stepping from one foot to the other, was a very nervous Jez. I couldn't do anything but rush over to him and grip him in the strongest bear hug, pushing my face into his chest and crying out, "Jez! Jez, why did you run away? I forgive you. I was so worried when Fran told me you hadn't gone into school. I thought you had done something really stupid. I'll take you back at any time. Just say you'll be mine once more." I felt his comforting hug, but realized it didn't have the confident grip I was expecting. Retaining my grip on him, I leaned back and looked into his face. He wouldn't meet my eye, and a second later he looked away as the doorbell rang. I heard a conversation in the hall. "Hello, Mrs. McIntosh. I'm Elizabeth's sister, Francine. I'm very pleased to meet you." Fran came through to join us in the conservatory, sliding the French window closed behind her. Jez looked from one of us to the other. "Lizzie-Beth, did you find my letter? I thought I explained that I can't take either of you. If I married you, Lizzie-Beth, I would really struggle to say the vows, let alone keep them when I know that your sister is as beautiful as you." "Jez," Fran spoke up, "there is something you need to know about me. I wouldn't tell you this, but I have driven a knife between Lizzie-Beth and myself, and this is the only way I can remove it." She paused, looking for a way into her admission. "If Paul were Dr. Jekyll, then I would be Mr. Hyde." We both looked at Jez, but there was no look of understanding on his face. "Jez, I am Paul. I'm a transvestite." Jez backed away from Fran, tripped, and ended up sitting in one of the garden chairs that furnished the conservatory. "Paul? What does Paul have to do with this? He is in America. Paul is a bloke. Like me. You're not a bloke. You're Lizzie-Beth's sister." Seemingly random statements were coming from Jez. "Blokes don't look like you." "Jez, Fran is my sister and my brother. I love both of them." I was still looking at Jez and saw a range of emotions cross his face, starting with understanding, then confusion, and finally anger. That look remained. He got to his feet and started shouting. "What were you thinking when you were kissing me? Let's have a gay old time with Jez. He won't mind. He'd love to stick his cock up my arse. Well, I'm not that way inclined. And if you weren't Lizzie-Beth's brother, I would beat you to a pulp. God knows what made you come out of the closet now, just before your sister's wedding, you pervert." Fran stepped behind me and I could hear her sobs. "Jez, stop it. That is enough. There are things you don't understand that you need to know, and I will try and explain them as best I can, because I'm not sure I understand them myself. I don't think Paul is gay. I think he is transsexual. That means that even though he is biologically male, he has all the feelings and emotions of a woman. It is what he is. He has no choice in these feelings, although he has managed to repress them for many years, for my benefit." I turned to look at Fran, for which I will be eternally grateful. When he became Fran, it was like a safety valve blowing. All the pent-up sexual emotion came out in one go, and you just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. As to the timing, that is our fault. Paul so much wanted to join me at my hen night that he volunteered to dress as a woman, and I, not understanding his nature, jokingly set him a target at which I would let him join. When Paul became Fran, he passed that target with flying colors, and I couldn't back down on my promise. We should have told you what was going on, but I was worried about your reaction. I should have trusted you, but I suppose I was a little in shock. I'm very sorry that we deceived you. Now Paul understands Fran's emotional side better. She will have control of her emotions, and the flirting with you, I'm sure, will stop. It was the longest speech I had made in a long time, and I thought I was spoken out, but as I turned to Fran to comfort her, I realized that there was something else I needed to say. Jez, I love you very much, and I welcome you back with open arms, but please don't ask me to turn my back on Paul or Fran. I don't think I am strong enough to make a choice like that. Jez, standing with clenched fists at his side, looked at us, then strode past into the house. A few seconds later, we heard the door slam as he closed it with unnecessary force. Fran and I looked at each other before Fran started rummaging in her bag for a tissue to clean up. Jez's mother poked her head nervously through the door. I think he will be gone for some time. I was going to put the kettle on. Would you like some tea?" Hardly an original icebreaker, but most welcome. We went through to the kitchen and sat around the table. When Jeremy is wound up about something, he goes for a walk, usually ending up on Salisbury Hill looking over the valley. What's so funny? We have a similar place at home. I explained about Coombe Hill on the Cotswold Escarpment and its solitary tree and views over our town. "Things always seem better when you're there." Mrs. McIntosh cleared her throat. "Girls, this is embarrassing, but with the raised voices, it was a bit difficult not to hear what was being said in the conservatory. My Jeremy has been very silly. Elizabeth, I hope he'll give you the chance to take him back." She turned to look at Fran. "And I gather you were the cause of this upset?" Fran studied the bottom of her teacup. "Well, I hope you're happy with what you've done." Fran screwed her face up, and I guessed she was trying to hold back the tears. "Mrs. McIntosh, believe me, I wish I hadn't behaved the way I did. I'm trying to make it up to both Lizzie-Bet and Jez." Mrs. McIntosh pulled a face at the shortened name. "You know, Francine, I only met your brother once when he helped Jeremy move into his house. I thought he was a lovely boy. I think you are an admirable counterpart." Her smile showed respect, but also just how much she had overheard. The teapot went round the table, got refilled, and had gone around a second time before we heard a key in the lock and the door open much more quietly than it had been closed. Jez, wind-blown and wet, put his head around the kitchen door, looked at all of us before letting his eyes rest on the teapot. "Is there any more tea in that pot?" "I made a fresh pot, Jeremy. You go and have a shower and change into some clean clothes. I think there are some in your old room." The kettle boiled, the tea brewed, and Jeremy came back to the kitchen. I giggled. "You've grown a bit since you last wore those." He looked down at the training bottoms that finished 2 inches higher than they should, and at the sleeves of the rugby top that were similarly too short. "This stuff is from when I was in the 6th form. It's all that was left since I moved out." He came and sat at the table, grasping the mug his mother left for him. "Mum, can the 3 of us talk in private, please?" "Oops, excuse me. I'll be in the lounge if you want me." When we were alone and the door shut, Jez turned to me. "Lizzie-Beth, this is so complicated. I hope I'm going to do the right thing. I feel honored that you would take me back after what I had done to you. I accept your offer, and I promise that I will try my hardest to do what is right for us, but..." The rest of his sentence was stifled as I threw myself at him and kissed him fully on the lips. After about a week, he prized me off and put me back in my chair. He chuckled until he turned to Fran. "Paul, Fran, whatever. I'm sorry for some of the things that I said. I was angry, still am angry about what you did. I had real feelings for you, and if I'm honest, probably still do. When you told me who or what you were, I thought that maybe I was a bit homosexual. That really frightened me. I like Paul. If you give me a second chance, I hope I get to like you in a platonic way this time." Fran went to him to give him a hug, but he held her at arm's length. "Please give me time to adjust." I migrated back to Jez's knee, despite the creaks from the chair, and snuggled for all I was worth. We stayed the night with Jez's mum, and early the following day set off back to the West Country. This time I rode with Jez, and Fran followed. I collected my car from Jez's house and headed to the radio station, where I spent an hour explaining why I had run out the previous day. My explanation and apology were accepted, so long as I took the time as annual leave. Generous to a fault. That evening, we had to phone all the guys who were due to go to Jez's stag party to tell them it was delayed by 24 hours. Fran and I finally got to the shops to buy her a dress. She eventually chose a cocktail dress in petrol blue. I was a little concerned that she outshone me in it, but everyone said I was the girl at my party. Oh, my hen night was one to remember. All my girlfriends and female relatives were there. Fran's introduction went very well. My relatives from Swindon, who had known my mother better than I, said they weren't surprised by the revelation and spent the evening welcoming her to the clan. Having Fran with me that night was very special, and I have to say that given the choice of repeating the previous week and having Fran with me, or a straightforward week and no Fran, I would have gone through it all again. Paul returned from America the next day and was able to attend Jez's stag night. He was under orders to ensure Jez kept his clothes on and didn't get handcuffed to an immovable object. Jez and Paul were the best of friends that night. When he had taken Jez home, Paul came into my room to talk. "Lizzie-Bet, I don't think this will be unexpected news, but I have decided to become Fran full-time. Jez spoke to me before the party and said that he would accept me as either brother or sister-in-law. I was pleased for him. Watching him in his old clothes again for just one afternoon, I could see he was shy and nervous and didn't look comfortable. I decided it would be best if Paul immigrated to America and let Fran take over the business. I don't want any scandal or unpleasantness if I can help it." And that was the story we told people. A week later, it was my big day. All I can say is that everything went smoothly. Jez's mom helped me to get into my white wedding dress. The old church was beautifully decked out with flowers. My hero Paul took me to the altar and handed me over to Jez, who lifted the veil away from my face. The reception speeches were great. Paul made a speech saying how Dad would have been proud to see his daughter in her beautiful wedding dress and would have agreed that my choice of husband was pretty good. Jez's best man, an old school friend, made a hilarious speech about what Jez was like as a child. I won't go into details, but suffice to say I learned a few things about Jez I hadn't previously known, and Jez's ears were bright red for most of the speech. The best thing about the speeches is that no mention was made of the goings-on 2 weeks previously. When we returned from our honeymoon, I found that Paul had left and Fran had moved in permanently. She had also done a lot more shopping. I was looking through some candid photos a friend had taken of people watching us leave the church. In a couple of them, I saw a sad middle-aged lady who looked familiar. Jez didn't recognize her, so I showed them to Fran. She got a sad, serious look on her face. "Yes, I know who it is. It's Mother. I saw her at the wedding, but I found I couldn't talk to her, and I suspect she may not have spoken to me. I didn't point her out to you as I didn't want to spoil your day." I reflected on this over the coming days and couldn't decide whether it was good or bad. She had discovered that I was getting married and made an effort to come and see her little girl. That was good. She hadn't made contact with us on that day. Also good, I think. But if she knew what was going on, why didn't she contact us before or since? So now I'm married, and Dad was right. It was worth waiting until we were married before we made love. I think Jez agrees, as he will even stop watching sport if I blow in his ear. Fran is doing well. After working with an expert, she has decided that she will get the necessary surgery. I owe it to her to be there for her when she does. It's the least I can do for her.